Hey guys, I'm back with another episode of my podcast. Today we're going to talk about something that I saw on TikTok that has been nothing but fascinating to me, okay? This TikTok is about how you see yourself, whether you see yourself from first person, third person, and what it says about you. I love psychology, anything that involves psychoanalyzing people and just explaining their behaviors. I'm all in. That shit is so fascinating to me. Before I get started, I'm gonna whip out my iPad and just to briefly explain what the fuck I'm talking about, because you guys probably have no idea. I'm what is this bitch on about? You guys ever just ask yourself, do you see yourself in first person versus third person when it comes to recalling memories? If you were to recall, what did you eat for breakfast? What did you eat for lunch? I was brushing my teeth, or I was eating my meal, or I was feeding my dog. What was how do you recall that memory? Do you see yourself experiencing it from your POV directly, as if you literally plop a GoPro on your head and you recall that? Or do you recall yourself kind of doing it, but you're seeing it from far away, third person perspective? I thought that was really interesting because I didn't think people would ever comprehend themselves in a third person perspective. I immediately was obviously first person, duh. Who the fuck sees himself in third person? Be so for real, that must be kind of weirdly dissociative. If you want to look up the TikTok, her ad is Tara Dream of Sushi. She has 2 TikTok videos that kind of explain her theory behind the first versus third person perspective. Yeah, so take a minute and think about that. But she has her theories as to why you see yourself in that way and what it says about you. Okay, let me just try to explain this, okay? According to Tara, most people experience both perspective, but everyone has a baseline. And baseline is kind of picture if you were to recall something not significant that happened in your day, for example, eating breakfast or feeding your dog or drinking water. Do you view yourself as first or third person perspective? How do you recall that memory? You know what I mean? That's essentially your baseline. And she said everyone has a baseline. For example, first person baseline means you're very focused on your experience of something rather than the entire situation. She also says if you have a first person baseline like me, you're also very present and have heightened senses, and that she finds these people tend to be creatives, for example, artists, chef, musicians, designer, and so on. She said if you have a third person baseline, you're a lot more self-aware and considerate of your entire environment and situation that you're in. You're not just thinking about your experience, but you're also kind of conscious of what role you play in it. But first person can easily switch into third person depending on the situation and vice versa. And then the TikTok, she also said obviously she's not a psychologist, so she can't really have any backed up evidence on her theory. She also added in her TikTok saying that if you have a really negative experience, your brain might disconnect from yourself and you might remember the memory more in third person if you're a first person baseline. And one person that commented on the TikTok said that whenever I view my experience in a third person perspective, it's kind of a trauma response because they feel kind of removed from the situation, a little bit dissociative, because they're so hyper fixated on their surroundings. I feel 99% of the time I'm 100% first person baseline. Can you imagine just for example, can you imagine yourself viewing yourself, watching yourself from the kitchen cooking a meal? That is so wild to me. I don't know if I can ever comprehend that. People on TikTok that has a third person baseline, they're saying basically when they recall a certain memory, they see themselves doing that certain thing. For example, I'm cooking breakfast, but they don't see their face. They just see kind of the back or the side of themselves, and they're just watching from a bird's eye view. And that's so interesting because I'm first of all, obviously if you were to experience that, you're not gonna know what it feels like to watch outside of yourself, you know what I mean? So it's kind of a constructed memory that you made up in your brain. I don't know, I would love to hear people that consistently view themselves in third person perspective, because what do you mean? I'm just gonna bring it back to my own experience. It's funny because I realize it's not all first person, because if I recall certain memory from childhood, it is 100% from a third person perspective. And I think it either is a super highly emotional situation, or I don't want to say like traumatic, because some of the memories that I recall aren't exactly traumatic. For example, I remember that one time when I was really young, my dad, he like fractured his toe and we were all going to the hospital to like get him fixed up and shit. And like I remember that memory very vividly of like me watching myself like sitting outside of the waiting room waiting for my dad while my mom was sitting next to me. And like that was 100% like third person perspective. And thinking about that, I'm like, that's so interesting because I never really recall memories from a third person perspective, but like there's specific memory from childhood, and it's only childhood that I like recall from a third person. Like I feel very removed from the situation. I guess you could say like dissociated. It's really hard for me to sit down and think like, what was this girl thinking about at that age, at that time, in that situation? If I were to like recall the memory and like tell the story to my friends, it would be so much so where I'm like picturing this girl that I don't actually feel like it's myself. It's just some girl, and I'm just telling the story like, oh yeah, like this girl went into this like waiting room and she was waiting for her dad to like whatever, and I was hearing about the news, and like I was so worried about like what was happening with him, and like my mom was stressed out and like all that. But then like it's really hard for me to think like, okay, that was me in that moment. Like that was just like, to me in my head, it's like some girl. Or like when my parents, I remember when they first started trying to go to therapy because they like had issues in their relationship, and I was also like somehow dragged into it. I remember like waiting in the therapist room and like with my mom sitting next to me and my dad sitting across me, and like I remember that memory in like third person. I don't really like make the connection that that is like me specifically. I just think, okay, like that's just a memory I have in my head of like a girl, and that girl could be me, but it's like I don't really feel the emotions that goes through her in that moment. And that one time I remember this, and I don't even know if this is like accurate. This could literally be like my parents describing the situation to me like as I got older. But I remember when I was around 5 years old, I went to like a amusement park, and you know those like maze, you're in a dark room with a bunch of glass walls that acts like a maze, and then you're supposed to like go around it and like figure out your way to escape it, whatever. And I remember like running straight towards like a glass wall because I didn't realize that that was a wall, and I basically just went like headbang, like straight up, like crash into the glass wall, and that shit hurt so fucking bad. But like I remember that memory not in first person but in third person. Like I literally, like if I'm like thinking about that right now in my head, I could see this little girl just like walking around the maze being stupid, and then she just like run across like full speed towards like a glass wall, and that shit hurts so bad. But like I cannot really exactly remember that from like first person. That's like third person memory. Is it because your brain somehow register that as like a highly emotional memory? I either can recall things in like such crazy vivid detail where like if I close my eyes right now and like just try a little, I would be able to like literally imagine myself in the exact same situation. I was like, I remember what the room smelled like. I remember like how the room looked like. I remember what was said to me. I remember how it felt in that moment, and it was crazy because, okay, let me just put myself back in that experience that I've had like decades ago. You just experience this like crazy vivid memory that you're like, okay, wait, I didn't even know this was possible. I don't even know that I like know that I have this memory in my head, you know what I mean? But they were all like recalled in third person, and I just like, somebody please explain to me why that is, because that's so interesting to me. But like with day-to-day stuff, like I think I very much only experience first person. In this TikTok, this girl was saying like, if you're a first person baseline, you're very hyper aware of your experience, what you're feeling, and that is always very true. And I feel like every experience I like go into, I feel like I comprehend my own experience like 100% more than I would everyone else in the room. So maybe that's why, like, because I think I'm like also a highly sensitive person where like if I feel uncomfortable in a social situation, for example, like I feel that shit to my bones. Like it's really hard for me to ignore that because like I start getting like agitated, or like I just feel so uncomfortable, or I like have this like urge to just like run away. All my senses are super heightened, especially in like social situations. I'm just trying to imagine somebody that would be walking into a room and like, let's say, interacting with people or seeing their friends, and then later on that night recalling themselves seeing themselves like walking into a room and doing all those interactions, but like not from their own perspective. Like how does that work? Like if you're so removed from your own experience, like how do you just hyper fixate on like how other people perceive you, or do you hyper fixate on like what the vibe was of that social situation, you know what I mean? Like, oh yeah, and I remember seeing this like TikTok comment saying, like, somebody that has like a third person baseline saying that like whenever this person goes to like, I don't know, like a social event, they recall the memory in like third person because they're extremely hyper aware of everyone and like how they're being perceived, and they also have like social anxiety. You're so aware of other people's reaction and experience of you that you see yourself from a third person. That's very interesting because like I had like social anxiety in high school. I want to say like pretty severe social anxiety, and I never was able to like perceive that experience from a third person perspective. I'm just thinking about this experience in my head. I'm like, okay, like she's walking into a classroom and like people are looking at her, or like she does things that's weird and people are noticing it, and then like she's being awkward, whatever. Like I always see it from my POV where I'm like, hey, like I should walk in this room right now. I feel so uncomfortable and like I'm a little shaky, or like, oh my god, is my arm doing that weird thing? Where should I sit? Am I walking around the classroom too much that people are like taking notice of me? Like it's literally from my own POV, and I don't know how people perceive that from third person. That's like fascinating to me. Also, another thing that this girl said on her TikTok, she was like, if you have a first person baseline, you kind of experience like whenever you're, you know, if you're like an artist or if you're a musician or like an athlete and you're in your flow state, you kind of experience that in third person. But I don't. As a designer myself, I don't really have the same experience. I wish it switches around. That would be so interesting. You know what I mean? Like I would love to just have like various memories where it's like some of them are first person, some of them are third person. What's also interesting is like it's so consistently first person for me that like I also dream in first person. Like I was thinking about this, right? And most of my dreams, like it's very vividly from my perspective. I remember this one dream that was fucking wild. Like I literally remember running away from like two gunmen that was like trying to chase me and my friend down, and like it's just one of my friends from college, and I don't even know how we even end up in that situation, but we were getting chased down by these gunmen, and we were like hiding in like some random apartment in like the bathroom and like crouching to the floor and trying to like stay still, and I was like shaking. It was really fucking scary because it felt really real, and obviously that was some first person perspective. And then like we somehow also end up in like an opera theater, and we were trying to be smart and like distract this gunman and think, okay, like obviously if we go to like a crowded places there, it's so hard for them to identify us, whatever. So we went to this like opera theater, kind of like slowly tiptoeing around the crowd and like hiding behind like people's chairs and people giving us weird looks, being like, what the fuck are these two people doing? And like we were just actually trying to hide away. Anyways, that was all super vivid. Like it's so crazy because in my head I could still like picture the exact scenery that was happening. Like I remember it was like super dark, and like it had like red velvet curtains all around, and it was like primarily old people. One of the gunmen eventually like spotted us, and the entire crowd just like immediately evacuated because he like pointed the gun at us or something, and everyone got really scared and just like left. And then the entire opera just like got quiet as fuck. And I remember like I basically got shot in the chest, and I remember waking up. I remember this like really weird sensation around my chest area, and it like felt like pain, even though like obviously nothing has happened to me because I was in a dream, you know what I mean? So that was like a really weird experience, but that was 100% first person, and every other dream I've ever had has always been first person. But then sometimes I think to myself, I'm like, wouldn't it be so interesting if I could recall memories of myself from like third person? Because I always want to know, what is it like for other people to experience me? Like for example, like if my friend and me were just sitting and having a picnic and like eating a sandwich, whatever, like I want to know like how I would be like if I was a friend watching myself eat a sandwich. Like how would I appear, and like how would I act, and like I wonder if I would like the way I come across, if people would enjoy my company, if I'm really fucking annoying. Do people with third person perspective like have that perspective where they kind of like could imagine themselves being viewed by like other people? Honestly, comment below what your baseline is because I'm very interested. Some people say they like switch between the two, or like apparently it's like more common for you to have like both experiences. For me, like I said again, like childhood stuff, like highly traumatic emotional memories are in third person, but I think that's just because my brain is trying to protect me from feeling certain emotions that maybe I might not be ready to feel. And like I realized that when going to therapy is like a lot of the times when my therapist is like, okay, like try to recall certain memories from childhood and then like describe it to me. Like I feel so desensitized in my own experience. For example, like I don't feel any of the emotional aspect of things. Like for example, if something was like super traumatic, even if I were to like recall maybe like more recent stuff in like the last 10 years, it's always first person. But yeah, I like literally wonder how your brain works if you see yourself from third person perspective. You know what I mean? Also, like it kind of makes sense if you were to think about somebody that has like a third person baseline where they are a lot more hyper aware of other people's experience of themselves or just of the situation. But like I want to say I am somebody that really pick up on people's energy very quickly, and I can almost feel if a vibe is off, if somebody like doesn't want to be there, or they're like a little annoyed, or they're a little tired. Like I immediately pick up on it. I'm that type of person where like I would think, okay, shit, is that my fault? Like is there something I can do to like make this person feel more comfortable? As soon as somebody is feeling like a negative experience and I'm hanging out with them even though they're trying to hide it, I can immediately pick up on that. And I'm like a super highly empathetic person as well. But it's interesting because like I don't have that experience where I perceive my own memory from third person because I'm so hyper aware of my surroundings. I actually don't. I actually am just focused on myself. And I don't know if like other people experience this, but like when it comes to things that are like, I don't know, like quite difficult to deal with in life, like things that happen to you and you're like, holy shit, this is like borderline fucked up. I use humor to like cope with everything, and it has been, I don't know, it's like the best thing ever. Like it comes naturally. I don't really like have to think twice and have to be like, all right, like let's force yourself to remove yourself from the situation and find it funny. Like it just comes to me and I love it. Like I don't know if you guys ever also recall a situation and like to you it's funny but no one else is funny. Please tell me, because like I'm not the only one, right? I think it's fun, like in obviously like in the moment when it's happening you're like crying about it and being like, holy shit, this is the worst thing ever. But as soon as it happens and as soon as you have like a couple of days of just like bed rotting and like really like marinating in your own pain, I feel like that memory just like kind of goes away, and then you just become like really desensitized and just you recall the situation as it happens, and like logically this is what happened, this is what I was doing in that situation, but like all the like emotional pain is completely removed from you and you're like hee laughing about it, you know? And I love that. Like thank you brain for doing this to me, because like thank God. Also like I feel like sometimes there's no time to be like sad about certain things that happen in your life. Like you have no control over it, you know what I mean? Like yeah, laugh about it. Fuck, like I don't want to be like crying about this shit. I feel like if you just keep kind of carrying the past and like things that happened to you that were bad in the past, and you keep like carrying them and like thinking about them and like ruminating, just only brings the misery with you, and like it's hard for you to move on if you're just gonna be like pitying yourself, you know? You just gotta laugh it off and be like, oh my god, story time, guys, that's crazy. And I don't know, maybe it also builds character, because like I hate to say it, but sometimes I feel like without the things that I've been through like in my upbringing, I wouldn't be the person I am today. I think it also like expands your threshold of like the stuff that you can handle, so when things get thrown your way, it's almost like it doesn't matter, because at the end of the day you know you're gonna be okay. Because if you were okay at the age of 15 going through something traumatic, you're gonna be okay when you're going through a breakup in your adult years. You know what I mean? Like it's all Gucci and fine. Like obviously in the moment it's like, holy shit, this is like the worst thing ever, but you always are able to tell yourself, I've been through worse, I've been through so much worse, so none of this is actually gonna kill me. Like I'm only gonna grow stronger from this situation. And I also have this like ability in my brain to like dissociate a little bit, where like I feel a lot more removed from the situation, so it's not as painful if you let yourself feel out all your emotions and marinate and be sad, and then it just goes away. You kind of don't really carry the pain with you anymore, and it's all happy, daintily perfect. What am I saying? Anyways, this is probably gonna be like a short podcast episode. I don't really know what the point of this is. It's just that I finally found the TikTok that I've been wanting to find, and I've been wanting to like talk about it, because I really, honestly, this isn't really just like me analyzing the theory that she has on her TikTok, but I really just wanted to hear what other people have to say. I probably would start asking everyone around in my life like, hey, like remember the last thing that you ate, or like the last time you brush your teeth? Did you remember yourself from like first or third person perspective? And then maybe it like tells me more about them, whether you're like a lot more hyper fixated on your own experience and your senses are like heightened, you feel, but you're probably like emotional and sensitive like me, or you're somebody that like kind of sees the situation as a whole, and like you see the role that you play in the situation, and you see like essentially the vibe you bring to the function, whether like it's like how you make people feel or like how people are perceiving you and all of that. Because I don't know, maybe is there like a sense of control that people want, where they do want to like see the role that they play in certain things, so they can like constantly evaluate that and tweak it however they want. Anyways, I hope you guys enjoy listening to me babble about some random fucking theories I found on TikTok, and please comment below what yours is, because I just want to know. This is so interesting to me. I wonder like if it actually like helps like distinguish like what your personality type is. But anyways, I don't know, I feel like all this is kind of, there's not like a proven like psychological science behind this. I feel it's not really even a theory. You can't even call it theory. I love to psychoanalyze people. I love to just like think about like how other people are experiencing the world versus how I'm experiencing the world, because it's crazy that like sometimes you just forget that like some people don't see the world as you do exactly, and sometimes you forget that. Anyways, I don't know what the fuck I'm saying. I'm gonna go now. I feel like I've rambled enough. Tune in for another episode because I will keep posting. I love talking to the microphone and talking to myself. Actually, I fucking love this shit. It's actually therapeutic. It's a weird way for me to like see myself from a third person, because when I'm editing, I'm like, this is how this bitch comes across. And like whenever you speak your thoughts into like reality, you kind of like process your own like thoughts and emotions in a more coherent way. And this is kind of how like when I started wanting to like do a podcast, it's because I like, instead of journaling and writing your feelings down, I would like record myself on my phone and be like, okay, hey, like if you feel a certain way, if you feel really overwhelmed, just like record yourself on voice memo and then just like talk about your feelings instead of having to write down. Because sometimes, bitch, I'm too lazy to be scribbling 2 pages in. I'm like, my hand is sore, I got like lead all over my hand. I only journal whenever I'm like extremely going through it. So I feel like talking is just a lot more like effortless, and I can kind of just like do it in the moment as I feel like it. If I have an idea, I record a little voice memo. If I'm going through a horrible breakup, I record a voice memo. If I'm like, okay, shit, let me practice what I'm trying to say to this person because I'm trying to say something or confront them, whatever, record a voice memo. You know, like it's just so convenient. And I think after doing that for like a while now, I'm like, you know what, fuck it, like maybe I can just like do this on a microphone and like actually just put it out there, because it's therapeutic for me. And I like processing my own thoughts and emotions through watching myself, and it's kind of like this like self-discovery process. I don't really know, but anyways, I don't know what I'm saying, okay? But I hope you have fun tuning in, and please comment below like a blue heart if you have listened to this episode to this point, because I really want to know like if people actually like fully listen to the entire episode. Anyways, goodbye, love you, bye.